rigid, refuses to even engage in negotiation? Or how do you deal with someone who uses dirty tricks? And so I wrote a book called Getting Past No.
What are the main messages there?
The main messages there were, again, like judo or jiu-jitsu, instead of attacking the other side, you step to the other person's side so that you can jointly attack the problem. And the main message there was building them a golden bridge. It comes from the Chinese military strategist, 5th century BC. He talked about building your opponent a golden bridge to retreat across. In negotiation, I would define it more positively as how do you build a golden bridge for them to advance across towards a mutually agreeable solution. In other words, how do you make it as easy as possible for the other side to say yes? Let me give you an example.
Yes.
Steven Spielberg, you know, the filmmaker, when he was 15, his life was terrorized by a bully who was a couple years older than him, always beating him up, picking on him, making his life pure hell. And he would run home from school dive under his bed, call out "save" to himself. So one day he says, how do I get this bully off my back? You know, how can I negotiate with him? So he says, goes up to the bully one day, he says, you know, I'm making these little home movies. Even then he was making home movies. And he said, I'm making one about fighting the Nazis. And I was wondering if you'd like to play the war hero. Well, the bully at first laughs in his face, but a couple days later he comes back and kind of grudgingly says, okay. So young Spielberg takes him, makes him a war hero, dresses him up with a backpack and the full works. In the movie, he says after that movie, that little home movie, that bully became his best friend. His best friend in high school was the bully. How did he transform a bully into a best friend? How did he negotiate? He built him a golden bridge. He made it attractive for him to do what he wanted him to do. How? By putting himself in his shoes, understanding, why does a bully bully? What's the underlying motivation? What's the underlying interest? What is a bully bully? They want recognition, they want power, they want control. So he thought, what do I have in my control, in my resources, that I can do? Well, I can make him a war hero in my movie. By meeting his basic needs, he got the bully to actually come to his side.
Interesting. Have you applied the same principle in political negotiations or conflict resolutions?
Absolutely.
For example, can you share an anecdote?
Well, okay, an anecdote. Negotiating with Hugo Chavez. So, you know, I was involved in mediating between Hugo Chavez, President Hugo Chavez of Venezuela, and his political opposition. And you know, Chavez is a very strong character, very powerful man. And I remember at one point I went to see him. It was about 9 o'clock at night at his presidential palace. He kept me waiting, he had a cabinet meeting or something. I didn't get in until midnight. And I thought maybe it would be a one-on-one meeting with him, but in fact, his whole cabinet was arrayed behind him, and we were sitting, a little bit like you and I were sitting like this. And so we started making small talk, and I said, you know, that it seemed to me that things were getting a little bit better in the situation, the conflict situation. And he leaned into me, he said, what do you mean better? Things are getting much worse. Let me tell you what they're doing. And he got furious. I mean, he was just really, it was like he leaned in right to my face. And at least 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes, maybe even an hour, he was, you know, shouting, you know, and I didn't know how much of it was designed to impress his ministers, how much of it was real and so on. But he was shouting, and, you know, he was saying, you neutrals, you're being fooled blind by the other side. And you know, of course, you feel like reacting, you feel like defending. But I realized, you know, going to the balcony, you know, it's not going to advance the process for me to get into an argument with the president. So I just pinched the palm of my hand here, which is often a kind of technique of just staying alert and just not reacting. One of the greatest powers you have is not to react, and just let him finish. Yeah. And at the end of 40 minutes, he finally heaved a sigh and said, so Yuri, what should I do? Wow. And then, okay, so if you try to reason with someone who's in an angry state of mind, you can't get anywhere. But if you listen to them, if you actually hear them out, and listening is one of the key arts in negotiation, then they might come into a reasonable state of mind where they're finally ready to hear. And so I had a proposal to him about, let's have a cooling off period over Christmas time so that people could enjoy their Christmas and so on. And he was very friendly and said, why don't you come around the country with me, and so on. And so it was completely a transformation just by the power of not reacting, the power of listening.